Today, we're diving deep into the story of the Mughal Empire. I mean, think about it. For over 300 years, this one single dynasty absolutely dominated the Indian subcontinent. They left behind a legacy that's literally written in marble, in poetry, and in law. It's this sweeping epic of legendary conquerors, brilliant administrators, and artistic genius that really did change the course of history forever. And this is the family at the very heart of it all. It kicks off with Babur, the ambitious founder, who showed up in 1526, and it all wraps up with Bahadur Shah II, the very last emperor who was exiled in 1857. This timeline, it maps out their entire incredible journey, from conquest and getting a foothold to a golden age of prosperity, and then a really slow, dramatic decline. We're going to meet conquerors, builders, poets, and yeah, even a few puppet rulers along the way. So, that brings us to the big questions, right? What were the secrets to their success? How in the world did one family manage to build and, more importantly, sustain such a massive, diverse empire for so long? And on the flip side, what were the cracks that started to appear in its foundation, the ones that eventually led to its total collapse? That's the story we're about to get into. All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to start at the very beginning, with the dawn of the empire under its founder, Babur. Then we'll see how it was forged into this stable, prosperous state during its golden age. We'll look at the absolute peak of its cultural power, followed by a period of massive expansion that, and this is key, also contained the seeds of its own destruction. Then we'll trace that long, slow collapse, and finally, we'll take a step back and really examine the legacy they left behind. Okay, so our story kicks off with one man, Jagirdari Muhammad Babur. Now, this wasn't just some random warlord. The man had a serious pedigree. He traced his roots back to two of the world's most legendary conquerors, Timur on his father's side and Genghis Khan on his mother's. After inheriting a tiny kingdom in what's now Uzbekistan, he was driven by ambition, but he was also getting squeezed by the rising Uzbek threat. He looked at India, which was full of internal fighting, and saw both a safe haven and a massive opportunity. And the decisive moment, the big one, came in 1526 at the First Battle of Panipat. Babur's army was massively, and I mean massively, outnumbered by the forces of the Delhi Sultan, Ibrahim Lodi. But, and this is a huge but, Babur had a technological and tactical edge. This wasn't just another battle. It was the start of a whole new kind of warfare on the subcontinent. His innovative use of gunpowder, fielding cannons and firearms, combined with his lightning-fast cavalry, was something Lodi's old-school army just had no answer for. But honestly, the real game-changer wasn't just the tech, it was his strategy. The absolute genius of Babur's plan was something called the Tulugma system. See, instead of a simple head-on clash, he split his army up. His center was protected by this line of carts he chained together with cannons firing from behind them, a tactic he borrowed from the Ottomans called the Rumi method. So while this pinned down Lodi's huge force, his elite cavalry units would just swing around the sides and attack the enemy from the rear. It created this devastating pincer movement that completely encircled and just crushed a much larger army. It was a total masterclass in tactics, proving that a smart strategy could absolutely overcome brute force. So after Babur's death, the throne passed to his son, Humayun. But the empire was far from secure. Humayun inherited a kingdom with a totally empty treasury and an administration that was, frankly, a mess. He was up against a really formidable rival, an Afghan leader named Sher Shah Suri, who beat him at the Battle of Chausa in 1539 and then did it again at Kannauj in 1540. This forced Humayun into a humiliating 15-year exile, wandering through Persia, while the Sword dynasty took over his new empire. Humayun was such a fascinating guy, a real contradiction. He was a brilliant scholar, but also deeply superstitious. I mean, just listen to this. His court life, his military campaigns, even just simple journeys were all meticulously planned out based on astrological charts. Can you imagine that? The man who temporarily lost a massive empire was trying to run it by reading the stars, literally looking to the heavens for guidance on state affairs. He did eventually get his throne back in 1555, only to die a year later after a tragic fall in his own library. So, after Humayun's sudden death, the entire fate of this very fragile empire fell onto the shoulders of his son, Akbar, who was just 13 years old. At first, he was guided by his regent, Bahram Khan, and he had to secure his throne at the Second Battle of Panipat. But Akbar would prove to be so much more than just another conqueror. He became the true architect of the Mughal Empire, transforming it from the shaky military occupation into a stable, enduring, and incredibly prosperous state.
So, how did he pull it off? Well, Akbar introduced a series of absolutely brilliant administrative reforms. The cornerstone was the Mansabdari system. This was a graded ranking system where every single official, military or civil, held a specific rank. This rank determined their salary and how many troops they had to keep ready for the empire. It was genius because it created a loyal bureaucracy that was directly accountable to the emperor, not to some local lord. He also completely overhauled the land revenue system, making taxation fairer. And crucially, he pursued a policy of inclusion. He got rid of the hated jizya tax on non-Muslims and formed strategic marriage alliances with the powerful Rajput kingdoms, integrating them right into the fabric of the empire.
But at the very heart of Akbar's entire philosophy was this concept, sulh-i-kul, or universal peace. Now, this wasn't just passive tolerance, it was an active policy of inclusion. Akbar was deeply, genuinely curious about other faiths. He built a hall of prayer, the Ibadat Khana, where scholars from Hinduism, Jainism, Christianity, and Zoroastrianism would all come to debate with Muslim theologians. He truly believed that all religions had some truth and that no single one had a monopoly on it. The whole idea was that everyone should have freedom of expression, just as long as they didn't challenge the state or start fighting with each other. This policy was the glue that held his incredibly diverse empire together.
Okay, so after Akbar's long and really foundational reign, the empire entered this period of incredible stability and wealth under his son Jahangir and his grandson Shah Jahan. This era is often seen as the cultural zenith of the Mughal Empire. While the government pretty much kept running on the tracks Akbar had laid, these two emperors funneled the empire's vast resources into patronizing the arts, and they left behind a legacy that is still just breathtaking today.
Jahangir was a true connoisseur, an absolute art lover. And while his politically brilliant wife, Noor Jahan, handled a lot of the day-to-day governing, Jahangir's real passion was the painting workshop. Under his patronage, Mughal miniature painting reached its absolute peak. He had this scientific eye for detail and demanded super realistic depictions of plants and animals. His painters, like the master Ustad Mansour, created these works of stunning accuracy. Jahangir was also fascinated with portraits, and it was during his reign that we start seeing the introduction of halos, or divine lights, around the emperor's head in official portraits, a pretty clear visual statement of his semi-divine status. So if Jahangir mastered the art of the brush, his son, Shah Jahan, mastered the art of stone. His reign is totally synonymous with architectural grandeur. Shah Jahan had an obsession with symmetry, with harmony, and with really expensive materials, especially white marble. This passion gave us some of the world's most iconic buildings, the Red Fort and the Jama Masjid in his new capital, which is now Old Delhi. And of course, his ultimate masterpiece, the Taj Mahal. This breathtaking mausoleum for his beloved wife, Mumtaz Mahal, is still the ultimate symbol of the Mughal Empire's opulence and artistry. Now, after a bloody war of succession against his own brothers, Shah Jahan's son, Aurangzeb, seized the throne, and his reign, which lasted nearly 50 years, is one of the most complex and controversial in all of Mughal history. Under Aurangzeb, the empire expanded to its largest size ever, covering almost the entire subcontinent. But, and this is a big but, this expansion came at a tremendous cost, and his policies started to unravel the very fabric of unity that his great-grandfather Akbar had so carefully woven together. I mean, just look at this comparison. It shows a complete reversal of Akbar's policies. It's like night and day. Where his Greek father promoted universal peace, Aurangzeb, who was a devout and orthodox Sunni Muslim, enforced strict Islamic law. He brought back the jizya tax on non-Muslims, a deeply unpopular move that alienated huge parts of his empire. While Akbar celebrated a diverse court culture, Aurangzeb dismissed court musicians and artists, seeing many of the arts as un-Islamic. And where Akbar built these crucial alliances with Rajput states, Aurangzeb's policies just shattered those relationships, turning former allies into bitter enemies. And this really highlights the central paradox of Aurangzeb's reign. For the last 25 years of his life, he was completely obsessed with conquering the Deccan Plateau in the south. These campaigns were long, brutal, and unbelievably expensive. So while he did succeed in expanding the empire to its largest size, the constant warfare totally drained the imperial treasury. And at the same time, his rigid religious policies and heavy taxes were fueling widespread rebellions all across the north, from the Jats and Sikhs to, most importantly, the Marathas, who used guerrilla warfare to just bleed the Mughal armies dry. He was winning territory in the south while losing control of his own heartland. So when Aurangzeb died in 1707, the empire was huge, but it was hollowed out.
And what followed was a century and a half of decline. This period is known as the era of the later Mughals, and it was just a succession of emperors who were often weak, ineffective, or just pawns in the hands of powerful nobles. That strong central authority that had defined the reigns of someone like Akbar or Shah Jahan, it was completely gone.
Just look at this timeline. It tells its own story, doesn't it? After Aurangzeb, the throne basically became a revolving door. Emperors came and went in a flash. Powerful nobles became the real kingmakers, installing puppet rulers they could easily control. Farrukh Siyar, for instance, got to the throne with the help of these influential courtiers called the Sayyid brothers, only to be kicked out by them later. All this constant infighting and court intrigue just paralyzed the central government, leaving the empire fatally vulnerable.
And then came the moment. The moment that just shattered any remaining illusion of Mughal power. It all came down to a single, catastrophic year that would expose just how weak the empire had truly become. In 1739, the Persian emperor Nadir Shah just swept into India. He defeated the Mughal army and marched right into Delhi. What happened next was a horrifying sack of the city. Tens of thousands were massacred. Nadir Shah plundered an unimaginable amount of wealth, carrying away the legendary peacock throne and the priceless Kohinoor diamond. This event, it was a death blow to Mughal prestige. It was like a giant announcement to the world that the Emperor of India was powerless to defend his own capital.
The sacking of Delhi wasn't the final nail in the coffin, but it was pretty darn close. It was the beginning of the end. The empire limped on for another century, but only as a shadow of its former self. So let's just summarize the key factors that brought this once mighty dynasty to its knees. Because it wasn't one single cause, but a whole combination of interlocking problems. So what brought it all crashing down? It really wasn't one thing, but a perfect storm. First, you had a leadership crisis. Without a clear rule for who gets the throne, every emperor's death kicked off a devastating civil war. Second, an economic crisis. Aurangzeb's endless wars had totally bankrupted the state. Third, a political crisis. As the center got weaker, powerful governors and rising powers like the Marathas just carved out their own kingdoms. And finally, with the empire hollowed out and fractured, these devastating foreign invasions sealed its fate, creating a power vacuum that a new force, the British East India Company, was more than ready to fill.
And that brings us to our final thought. The Mughal Empire may be gone, but its legacy is absolutely everywhere. It's in the majestic architecture of the Taj Mahal, it's in the administrative divisions of states, the food we eat, the languages we speak, and the complex, beautiful tapestry of culture on the subcontinent. So I'll leave you with this question to think about. Out of all these incredible contributions from art and architecture to systems of land revenue and governance, which piece of the Mughal legacy do you think has had the most lasting impact on the shape of modern India today?